Good morning. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. If you haven't already, I'd like to ask people to put their electronic devices on silent, as we always say. Joining us today, George Augusto, representing Russ Redding, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsello, the State Treasurer, and Kristen Heidingsfelder, representing Secretary of Revenue, Daniel Hassel. Thank you all for being here. Quorum of the board members being present, I'll call proceedings to order. First order of business, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, May 14th, to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters coming before the board today. I'd also like to announce that a special meeting of the board will be held on Wednesday, May 29th at 1 o'clock in this room for the purpose of considering the joint petition for change of control relating to the Sands Bethwork Casino. The formal agenda for the May 29th meeting will be posted on the board's website, and I would just note, in way of background, if anybody's been watching, we've been extremely busy lately, and we're trying to keep things on track and at the same time give everybody a full opportunity to be heard. So we will hold a special meeting to keep everything else on track. Otherwise, first order of business this morning is public hearing relating to Greenwood Gaming Entertainment. Before we begin, I'd ask that everyone who's going to speak today please state and spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. Additionally, I'd ask all non-attorney witnesses to please stand at this time and be sworn.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Petitioners, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. My name is Susan Yoakum. I am counsel to Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment. We are here today regarding Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment's renewal of its Category 1 slot machine license. This is, in fact, its third renewal. And with that, I will actually turn it over to Tom Bonner, who's chief counsel to the licensee. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members. Thomas Bonner, B-O-N-N-E-R, General Counsel for Greenwood Gaming. It's a pleasure to be here today. Most often, my colleagues and I appear before you related to consent agreements and the imposition of civil penalties related to regulatory infractions. But today, we're here to have you consider the renewal of the GGE gaming license and the related certificates attached to it. And since all of the reports prepared by BIE for the licensee, its entity, qualifiers, its principals, its key employees find us suitable and recommend licensure, we look forward to your positive action on our renewal application. I think you're aware of the recent retirement of our CEO, Tony Rickey, after 26 years with the company, and we wish him well in this new phase of his life. But in the wake of Tony's departure, the board of directors has formed a management committee to act as the ultimate executive authority pending the appointment of a new chief executive. 3 members of that committee are here this morning. John Dixon, to my left, our Chief Operating Officer, is now in his 30th year with our companies. Brian Bartlett, behind me, our CFO, has been with the company for 6 years. I also am a member of the committee, and you've been seeing me here for 13 years. Ron Davis, to my right, really has been with us since day one. He was the first employee engaged for the casino operation. My point is that although no CEO is before you today, the people who are here to present this application to you are the senior-most executives of the company. Mr. Dixon and I are also members of the board of directors, so we appear in that capacity as well. I'd like to make just a few remarks about some of the people who are not here today, but who are key to the continuing success of the Greenwood Racing and Gaming companies. Without the commitment of the very substantial financial and human resources that our owners have made and continue to make available to us, we wouldn't be here today as the #1 casino in Pennsylvania, both in terms of gross gaming revenue and in terms of the gaming taxes that we pay to the state. And we're proud of that position. Their continuing commitment to the company's facilities and people is the difference that keeps us on top. Also vital to our success is the guidance provided by the members of our board of directors, who play a very active role in providing oversight and direction to our executive and management teams. And our new management committee structure that I mentioned required that we designate a skilled and experienced professional to guide this new committee in its interactions with Greenwood's owners and board of directors. And that person is our deputy chairman of the board, Bill Hogwood, and he's been with the company since its inception in 1990. And finally, I bring greetings to you from our chairman of the board, Bob Green, who was out of the country attending to business and personal matters. It has been his custom to deliver preliminary remarks at hearings such as this, and in those remarks he would often extol the virtues and vast experience and management skills of the senior executives present, which we always were happy to hear. But today I'd like to turn the tables and offer a brief recognition of Mr. Green's invaluable contribution, not only to Parks Casino and the Greenwood family of companies, but also to the vital role he has played in making gaming in Pennsylvania a reality. Without Mr. Green's vision, foresight, perseverance, and dedication to the process 20 years ago and 15 years ago and through today, we might not be here today at all, or we might not be here against the backdrop of Pennsylvania gaming as the tremendous model of success that it is. And so we offer our thanks to Bob Green in his absence today. And now, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleagues, and John Dixon will lead the way.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is John Dixon, D-I-X-O-N. As you can see on the screen, a couple of very nice photographs of Parks Casino. We're the #1 casino in Pennsylvania, which we're very proud of, and it's been that way since we opened. And we've invested more than $700 million since 2006 in our casino property, creating what I think you'll agree is a beautiful destination, and our team delivers first-class service that provides an exciting atmosphere for our guests every day. Parks was one of the only 2 casinos to open in 2006, so we've been there since the very beginning. And of course, originally we had slot machines in our grandstand building and some limited food and beverage operations. And then we built the permanent casino that we have today, or at least phase 1 of it, which we opened in December 2009, creating Pennsylvania's #1 gaming facility. And at that time we had about 3,200 slot machines, and then we added 57 tables when tables were legalized in 2010. Since our last renewal hearing, we have continued to expand the business, and we've spent an additional $146 million in investments in the casino, including $27 million of new slot machines. We've expanded the gaming floor and added additional restrooms, a gift shop, a lounge bar. Recently we've added a new poker room. We've upgraded our surveillance systems, and we replaced all the carpets in the casino too last year. Our gaming floor is now up to over 183,000 feet, 3,200 slot machines, and 140 table games. In addition to those things, we've also added some non-gaming amenities. We added a 1,500-seat multi-purpose room, which is for live entertainment, but also for banquets and meetings and things of that nature. We added 3 new restaurants, Olivetto, which is an Italian restaurant, our Liberty Bell gastropub, and most recently a beer garden, and together that was a $16 million investment. We've also reconstructed some of the roads around the casino to improve access for our customers, make it safer. So this is a picture of our Excite Centre, and we're very pleased to have hosted some major acts since we opened just over a year ago. Of course, the most famous would be Sir Elton John, who was there recently. We've had Reba McEntire, Chicago, comedians like Jay Leno. Later this year we'll be having Toby Keith, Sammy Hagar. So really some very high-end entertainment in our facility. As well as live music and comedy, we also host boxing and mixed martial arts fights in this room as well as variety shows and other cultural entertainment. In addition, as I mentioned, we can convert the room for banquets and special events, and this weekend we have our first annual Bucks County Food and Wine Festival that we're quite excited about. This is a picture of our X Lounge, which is just outside the Excite Center, designed as a pre-function space for our showroom. Serves an array of craft beer, wines by the glass, and specialty cocktails. This is a picture of our Liberty Bell pub. We have a 33-seat bar. We have 28 draft beers, mostly local beers, and a large selection of wines by the glass. We used a lot of reclaimed materials in building the bar. The ceiling, the bar itself is all made of from reclaimed barnwood from central Pennsylvania. Multiple flat screen TVs, including a very large jumbo TV that you can't see in this picture, so that we can watch sports in the bar. The pub also features a rotisserie that has 2 top-of-the-range Rotisol rotisserie units, and we feature local free-range chicken, grass-fed prime rib, in addition to gourmet burgers and pub favourite foods like fish and chips and bangers and mash. For us English guys. This is a picture of Olivetto, which is our Italian restaurant, New York kind of little Italy style Italian restaurant with a focus on Neapolitan pizza and classic Italian-American dishes. The room features a copper ceiling and a custom mosaic floor. And in the bar in Olivetto, the bar in Olivetto has a focus on Italian wines by the glass and European draft beers. And this is our latest addition, which is our beer garden. The focal point is the craft beer wall that you can see here underneath the screen, where we serve 24 locally sourced beers that change pretty much every week. Beer garden has 2 of these large screens for sporting events, and we've also added some sports betting kiosks in this space, so customers can also now enjoy sports wagering as well. And the beer garden has a fully retractable roof and accordion doors that allow the space to be fully open air when the weather permits. And in addition, there's outdoor spaces where we have a custom fire pit and some outdoor games for people to enjoy. And the last picture, this is our new poker room. It's been open just over a year. We have 48 tables, multiple large screens to show sports. And again, we added recently sports betting terminals for our poker room customers. Now I'm going to hand over to Brian Bartlett.
Good morning. My name is Brian Bartlett, B-R-Y-A-N B-A-R-T-L-E-T-T. So after seeing all that, it's not only been good for our community, it's been providing substantial benefits to the Commonwealth. As the highest revenue generator in the state, we've provided $2.6 billion in taxes since our opening in 2006. $2.4 billion of that comes from slots. A little bit less than $200 million comes from table games, and most recently, about $1 million from retail sports wagering. It just started in January. We've also honored our commitment to racing. This is now this team's 30th year as the owner and operator of Parks Racing. Since 1990, the team has worked together with the Horsemen to establish one of the premier thoroughbred racing operations in the country. And just in the last 10 years, we've invested $43 million in investments and repairs to the backstretch. That includes repairing all of our barns, building 29 new barns, refurbishing 12 dormitories, implementing an industry-leading access control system for the restricted racing areas that maximizes the safety and security of personnel and horses, and other various improvements. In addition, just last year we paid nearly $49 million in purses, which translates into a daily average of $309,000. We're quite happy that our annual PA Derby was elevated this year to a Grade 1 stakes race. That, combined with our already Grade 1 Cotillion Stakes race, which is run on the same day in September, each has a $1 million purse and attracts the best thoroughbreds in the world. In addition, we make an annual donation of $50,000 to the Turning for Home for the humane care of retired thoroughbred racehorses. Our total is up to $550,000. So we've had a very successful run in the last 12 plus years, but I'm happy to say that the future remains bright. We have many opportunities that face us, and we're prepared to take advantage of them. We've taken a leading position in sports wagering with operations now underway at the casino, at South Philadelphia, and at Oaks. And we've taken our existing 360 bar and created a temporary sports wagering book at the casino, but currently we're working on a permanent one that'll house 10,000 square feet, world-class sports book, and we should be ready by the opening of the NFL season. Lastly, and in addition, we intend to bring our first-class casino to a new market in 2020. We've identified Shippensburg Township in Cumberland County as the site of our Cat 4 casino. Meanwhile, we're gearing up for the launch of interactive sports wagering that we should be ready in early June. And we're developing soon thereafter our online casino gaming product that we expect to be ready by the middle of July. So we've got a lot going on, and we are planning to capitalize as much as we can on this. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ron Davis, our Director of Diversity and Community Development.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Board, and Ron Davis, R-O-N-D-A-V-I-S. I am just have just a few remarks before going through the slides. My whole passion and the passion of our great team has been to share our success with the community. So it's not only me, but others on our staff that go out and do the things that we do and that you'll see in these slides. I also want to recognize Moselle Daniels for her outstanding inclusion and engagement, keeping us accountable in all the other areas of diversity and inclusion. And in fact, today we'll have a job fair, and we have next week an e-conference where Moselle will appear. So I want to thank her. We have had 52 consecutive meetings each quarter since I started. So I'm very proud of that. So our ears to the ground as we go forward. Our workforce summary as of December 2018, 2,100 employees, 402 employees in the racing operation, 2,200 employees, 82% are Pennsylvania residents. 42% of our employees are representatives of various historically underrepresented groups, and that compares to the local MSA of 10%. 41% of our employees are women. Workforce highlights. When we started this operation, continued to move forward on creation of 287 full-time permanent executive, managerial, and professional positions. 74% of all advancement opportunities are filled internally, and new casino professions, and you see those listed there. 83% of our executive managerial workforce resides in Pennsylvania, which is very key to us. Diversity in construction and vendor purchasing. 27% of our expenditures for the initial Parks Casino construction were allocated to MBE WBEs, which is extremely important. Local business enterprise, which we really emphasize. The local business must survive as an economic engine to make our casino have the impact that it should have on our community. Local business, you see expenditures from 2006 to 2018 were $810 million out of $1.7 billion spent. It's 48%, which is impressive. Total MBE WB expenditures, $60.5 million for a period of 2009 to 2018. And we specialize in how to do business with parks. We want people to know that Parks is out looking for business, that we're engaged with the community, that we're passionate about the community. Actually, our 31st will be next week at the Parks East. Over 1,100 outreach meetings, and we maintain memberships because we feel strongly that partnerships are the way that we help the community succeed. We maintain an active membership with Women's Business Enterprise Council. As you can see with those active memberships, we are members of various boards, and we feel passionate about that, so passionate that many of our employees, or some of our employees, serve on boards. I know I'm on 3 or 4 of these boards of directors, so that's to listen to the community. From 2014 to 2018, we have contributed more than $2 million through Pennsylvania's Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program, Opportunities Scholarship Tax Credit, OSTC. Those are programs that are very key, again, to connecting the community. Diversity and community highlights, and this highlights some of the things that we do that are unusual. Our scholarship, we have given over $100,000 in scholarships for 150 college-bound students. The schools listed, you see there, that are really close to our community. We have regular meetings with the Ben Salem Gamer Advisory Board, because we listen. We want to listen to the community and get feedback on what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what the challenges are. We serve on, as I mentioned, boards of directors, and I have the honor of serving on the National American Red Cross Board along with the local Red Cross Board. But all these boards and connections are through partnerships. The partnerships are very important to us, and we even have a addiction treatment program partnership for those with gambling addiction through Living Grin Corporation. I'm on that board also. Compulsive and problem gambling. You see the commitment, and we've always had the commitment to those who are having issues of problem with gambling. Our yearly contributions are listed. Again, the Living Grin Gambling Addiction Program, I think it's a solid way of moving forward to help those who need that help. Since 2006, we have made very substantial donations to and established meaningful sponsorships with over 800 organizations. Donations were made to international, national, local groups that support many various causes. And there are many and all of these are certainly important, but I'm proud of a couple that we really do things that are just outstanding. Veterans outreach programs. We have a program called Tour of Honor where we take 400, along with an organization, veterans from Vietnam and World War II to Washington. They see all the monuments, we bring them back, we host them, we have volunteers, and we're cheering when they come back. And the Tour of Honor is just an outstanding representative of what we do, along with other donations to the American Red Cross for national and international emergencies. Those are the two real highlights. And our habitat, we purchase houses, help purchase houses for those in need, and we actually build them. People come off the gaming floor and go to those houses and build them. So again, our team is outstanding in those ways and many more. Our community involvement we've been blessed with awards, both nationally, internationally, and locally. And again, our award is basically, for me, it's sharing our success, but of all the awards that are there, we get a reward from people who write letters, and I get many letters of thanks for the things that we do. We're an unusual company. In our outreach, we are members, for instance, of the corporate NACP organization. We're members, and we're included in a lot of the affinity groups that give us the underpinning of what we do. So these awards, nationally, regionally, and locally, are awards that we really are proud of. But more than that, it's the people in our community that we're proud of. Now I'm going to turn it back over to John, who will give our summary.
Thanks, Ron. So I think just in closing, we'd like to say that we've delivered on our promises and our commitments that we made when we first came here way back in 2006. We've created many jobs. We've generated new business for local suppliers, as Ron just mentioned. We've recaptured dollars that were leaving the state and being gambled elsewhere. We brought that back to Pennsylvania, creating significant tax benefits for the state. We've improved racing. We've improved the facilities we have for racing. We care very much about diversity and inclusion, and Ron does a great job in the community. We work with our local community very, very closely. We hire local businesses as much as we possibly can. We partner with educational institutions in our community. We have open communication with our community, and we support compulsive gambling programs as well. And that's the end of our presentation. I thank you very much for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from Enforcement Council?
Give a few, Chairman. James Armstrong for the Office of Enforcement Council, ARMSTRONG. Can I draw your attention to slide 6 of the presentation, industry leader continuing to move forward? At the public hearing in February, Parks reported casino square footage at 174,864 and 29 self-service sports wagering kiosks. In today's presentation, Parks is reporting 183,818 square footage and 52 self-serving sports wagering kiosks. Could you explain where the nearly 10,000 increase in square footage came from?
Yes. In this slide, we've included the recent addition of gaming square footage in our 2 race and sports books, where we've Oaks Race and Sportsbook and South Philly Race and Sportsbook, and we've added self-service gaming terminals in both those locations. So they fall under part of our total gaming square footage.
Okay, thank you. Can you explain the increase of 23 self-service sports wagering kiosks?
That's the ones we added in the 2 race and sports books.
Since the February presentation?
Since February, yes. Indeed, yes.
And that, I think I overheard earlier that there are some in the new pub. Are most of them in the temporary sports book in the 360 bar?
Yes, most of them are. Since we opened that, we added 3 more in there as well, so that's part of that additional number.
Okay, thank you. Can I draw your attention to slide 7 of the presentation? Can you provide more information on what the $2 million in mechanical electrical upgrades were?
We added a 3rd generator to the property so that our entire property is covered by generators. So if we lose power from PICO, we can continue to operate. And as we've grown the building, we needed to add another generator. The bulk of it was that. The rest of it was some upgrades to, we added a casino scent air system and a couple of minor upgrades to our ventilation system.
Okay, thank you. Can you provide more information on what was involved in the construction of the intersection at Mechanicsville and Byberry Road?
Yes, PennDOT required us to widen Mechanicsville and Byberry roads and provide left turn lanes, and then they re-signaled the intersection as well to improve safety for people turning left off both of those roads into our property.
Thank you. Can I draw your attention to slide 18, presentation that benefits to the Commonwealth? Taxes from sports betting rose from $0.8 million at the public hearing on February 28th to $1.2 million in today's presentation, a $0.4 million increase, correct?
Yes. For the extra time.
What was the cutoff date that determined that figure?
For the old one or for this
For
one?
this one, for the current presentation?
This is through March.
The sports book started in January, that's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at the end of February, in that presentation, you reported a $0.8 million in tax revenue was collected for January and February, according to the presentation, in February?
Yeah, there were 2 open in January,
Okay.
and then 1 was added in March.
Okay. So my question's not going where I thought it would go. So in March, you had a $0.4 million in taxes, in tax revenue.
It's we only updated it for 1 extra month.
Okay, so it wasn't April. April wasn't included in it. Okay. So are you averaging then a $0.4 million in tax revenue from the sports book?
Yes, but obviously it's up and down, depending on winnings and all that.
Okay, well, was it
But the average.
0.4
Yeah.
thereabouts in January, February, and March, making it 1.2 million today?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the average, yes.
Okay, thank you. And can I draw your attention to slide 18? The future remains bright. In your presentation in February, you spoke of opening a sports book at Valley Forge Turf Club in March of 2019. In your presentation today, you referred to operating racing sports books at 2 turf clubs, South Philadelphia Racing Sportsbook and Oaks Racing Sportsbook. Is the Oaks Racing Sportsbook the Valley Forge Turf Club you referred to in the first presentation?
Correct. We renamed it.
And why was it renamed?
Well, the Valley Forge Casino has a sports book, and to avoid confusion.
Okay.
And ours is located in Oaks, PA.
And are there plans for any more sports books at turf clubs?
We're actively looking at opportunities, yes. So we have 4 more OTB licenses that we could relocate, and we're actively working on that now.
Not anything planned for the very near future?
Nothing in the next. It will probably be a number of months before anything was ready to go.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Questions or comments from the board?
Just one quick clarifying, picking up on Enforcement Council. Explain again, and I'm sorry, I guess I was distracted by what page it was on and my thoughts. But Mr. Bartlett, in your presentation, you talked about something being ready to open in June of 19. Was that the Oaks Sportsbook?
No, that's our online sports wagering offering. Online.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, all the things we've been talking about.
Okay, so the online sports wagering, June, the
Right.
permanent sports book physical, summer before NFL season.
Correct.
Okay, that was where I got confused.
So you opened up some of your sports book in January, and it's been increasing ever since that. Have you noticed an increase in casino play with the sports book because we're seeing a different customer in that area, or is that even a consideration when you guys were considering this, or do you expect that in like your gaming experience to see a customer kind of transition maybe into more traditional casino play?
I think since we opened the sportsbook in the casino, we have seen a new customer for sports wagering. We have seen some crossover particularly between poker and sports betting. So our poker players are also seem to be interested in sports betting. And at South Philadelphia in particular, we've also seen an increase in racing business. I think because we've maybe brought some people back who used to be racing fans, and they've come back for sports, and they've remembered, yeah, I used to like betting on racing, and we've seen a good uptick in racing wagering as well. So it's been positive all round.
Any other questions? Enforcement Council have a presentation to make.
Not a presentation per se, but we would like to enter some exhibits into evidence into the record.
Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the Office of Enforcement Council wishes to enter 3 new exhibits into the record that will update exhibits entered into the record at the public renewal hearing on February 28th. These new exhibits have been provided to the board and to Parks Casino. The first is the Pennsylvania State Police have provided OEC with an up-to-date Uniform Crime Reporting System report on May 3rd for the period of January 1st, 2019 through April 30th, 2019, addressing incidents at Parks Casino since January. The Uniform Crime Reporting System report is Exhibit 1. On May 1st, 2019, the Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement issued a letter to OEC stating that there has been 1 new investigation opened at Parks Casino since it reported to OEC on January 11th, 2019. The Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement's letter is Exhibit 2. Finally, OEC conducted 1 additional compliance conference at Parks Casino's facility that was not included at the time of Parks Casino's public renewal hearing on February 28th. The compliance conference memorandum and Parks Casino's letter response are Exhibit 3. OEC would ask that Exhibit 3 be kept confidential, and OEC requests that Exhibits 1 through 3 be admitted into the record with the additional request that Exhibit 3 be kept confidential.
So moved.
Thank you.
Any response or comments from
We have
petitioners?
no objection.
Okay,
We would ask that our presentation also be made part of the record.
so moved. Any other questions or comments from the board at this time? Hearing none, this matter will be voted on later today during the Bureau of Licensing's portion of the agendas. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up will be Downs Racing Downs Racing's petition for certificate to conduct sports wagering. As petitioners get settled, I just remind everyone who's going to speak today to please state and spell your name for the court reporter. And if there are non-attorney witnesses that are going to be speaking today, I'd like to have them stand at this time and be sworn. One second. Is there anybody else? Only one non-attorney witness that's going to be speaking?
No, two.
Stand.
Are you raising your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I am Sarah Stoner with the law firm of Eckerd, Siemens, Sharon, and Malott. My name is spelled S-A-R-A-H-S-T-O-N-E-R. I'm here today on behalf of Downs Racing LP, doing business as Mohegan Sun Pocono. With me here today is Anthony Carlucci, President and General Manager of Mohegan Gaming and Entertainment, and Aviram Alroy, Vice President of Interactive Gaming. We are here today in support of Mohegan Sun Pocono's sports wagering petition. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to Avi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aviram, A-V-I-R-A-M, Alroy, A-L-R-O-Y. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Mohegan Gaming and Entertainment and our sports booking or sportsbook experience. But I'll lead with what we've done so far here in Pennsylvania. So Mohegan Gaming and Entertainment, or MGE, is an experienced provider of interactive games with iGaming license in New Jersey since 2015 under our Mohegan Sun division, and recently received approval for iGaming in PA. MGE and its New Jersey partner, Resorts Atlantic City, was the first to launch online sports betting in the state, initially with DraftKings and later with BetStars, and through Resorts AC's own sports betting skin. With all three sports betting skin and its retail operation, the sportsbook at Resorts Atlantic City is one of the biggest sports betting revenue generators in New Jersey right now. In Pennsylvania, we partnered with Kindred Group, who is also licensed in New Jersey and brings years of global experience in sports betting. And our sports betting petition seeks authorizations to offer online and bricks and mortar sportsbook at Mohegan Sun Pocono. Future plan includes seeking approval for sports betting at off-track betting locations. This is our leadership team. As you can see, myself and Tony are right here. Tony, President and General Manager, myself, Vice President of Interactive Gaming, Michael Silberling, our Manager, Chief Operating Officer, Mario Contometros, the Chief Executive Officer, and James, who was our interim chairman of the Mohegan Tribe.
All very handsome, but not very diverse group.
I was told I have a face for radio.
Still not a very diverse group.
So I'll go right to it for our sportsbook plan. I'll let Tony interject and speak a little bit about it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Tony Carlucci, C-A-R-L-U-C-C-I. I have to apologize. I thought I was going to have I thought I'd be able to point it out with like a laser, and unfortunately I cannot.
Move your microphone closer
I'm
or
sorry.
tilt it towards you. Thank you.
So I'll do my best to verbally explain, but in the blue shaded area is where our sports book is going to be located. As you can see, in the very beginning, the lightly shaded section is our main entrance. So as you will come in, okay, it's right in the main entrance, okay. That was previously a electronics store. To the left, it doesn't show in this thing, is our Molly O'Shea's Irish Pub. So you would basically enter. The security podium is a small section. It's very hard to see, but it's located. We're going to be pulling it back so that we can obviously, okay, make sure that no minors sneak into this area. It's very hard to see, but there's a column located by the shaded area. It's a small shaded area that used to be a wide open space that we're installing a rail so that nobody, particularly minors, will not be able to sneak in that way. Behind the shaded area where the sports book is going to be located is where and that'll come up later on in the presentation, is where we're hoping to move our poker room, because we see a lot of cross-play between the poker customer and also the sportsbook customer, as well as we believe a lot of table game play will have more of a crossover than slots. I think that's all I can say at this point.
Thanks. I'll give you some more of the renderings that we have. This is a top view of the plan with 4 terminals, a kiosk at the entrance and 3 at the other side. This is the front view of the rendering. And kind of a side view inside of how is it going to look. I don't know if you get a feel for it from the rendering. It's very modern, very comfortable, aiming for younger age. Just a little bit more details on the sportsbook. It's a little bit more than 1,000 square foot of a facility. It's near the casino entrance, as Tony mentioned. Total room capacity of 75 partners, including 42 couch seats and 23 seat heating, high chairs. There's a large TV screen wall, it can be divided to multiple sports. Also fair to mention, it's a smoke-free environment. It's going to feature, like I mentioned, 7 sports betting terminals, 3 teller booths. We're looking into adding 11 new FTEs, job positions, that are going to be created, including tellers, security, shift managers, and some account controllers to manage our partners and partners agreements. The game offered, the big 4, NFL and MLB, NHL, NBA, also NCAA, golf, tennis, boxing, rugby, MLS, Premier League, and other soccer leagues. The bets and offers are going to include straight bets, parlays, round robin, fixed odds, money lines, prop bets, and in-play betting. Going to talk a little bit about our partners and we're going to work with for the sportsbook. It's including Kindred, who is our sports wagering operator. They will manage our retail and online sports betting operation, including managing the website, providing managed services, payment, risk, customer support, reporting, KYC, and banking, either as a main provider or as third-party vendors. Pala Interactive, which I believe are here today as well. They're going to manage some of those third parties' processes. Camby, who's the operator of the book, odds, and technology, including risk monitoring, fraud prevention, pricing and trading, and Nuvomatic, who is the sports betting terminal, the physical terminals. Lastly, I want to explain to you how MGE is committed to responsible gaming. Mohegan Sun is strive to create unparalleled gaming and sport wagering experience. We will pursue our top priorities of safety and responsible gaming by educating our team members to recognize problem gambling and giving them resources to help, providing information and assistance to our players, participating in programs and initiatives to increase problem gambling and awareness, preventing underage gambling, and players are empowered to set time limits and deposit and bet limits for mobile or online sports betting, and in additional security will monitor the sportsbook entrance to prevent underage admissions. That's it for myself. Thank you very much, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Is there anything else in your presentation?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Questions or comments from Enforcement Council?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Cyrus Petrie, PITRE, Office of Enforcement Council. Mr. Carlucci, you mentioned that you were moving the poker room, and if you could get it back to slide 4. the overlay of the sportsbook plan?
It's there.
Okay. Where
You can turn it to the presentation.
Where exactly will the poker room be moved to?
And I want to stress, we're making a
right.
submission to move the poker room. It will be located as you pass the sports book going on to the we call it the river that, goes around and goes.
So walking up?
Walking up past the, with a blue shaded, not the, I'm gonna put the slide on slide 4.
Is there any way we could have this slide shown on the TV screens, please?
It's just easier, sorry, Richard.
No, that's
See it.
fine.
Thank you.
Okay. See, as you come into the main entrance, the blue shaded area, you would go slightly past that, and you would make a right.
Okay, so,
Okay. And you would walk. It's not directly right behind it. It's slightly over into that next section over there is where we're looking at putting the poker room. It's
Right
presently
next
called Petting
door
Grove.
to it?
Yes.
Next
Well, not directly up against that back wall. Slightly over a little bit more in that section.
Right there.
I can show you.
Wait, just show me right there, this point.
Here.
Okay, so further up the walkway.
Yeah, in that general vicinity.
Okay,
Right.
all right. With regard to the sports betting kiosks that you're adding, where will those be located? Will they be specifically in the sports betting area, or will they be located throughout the casino?
A mixture. We haven't secured the exact locations at this point. There will be a couple right in the general vicinity as you come in, because I want to stress that this is our main entrance, and we believe that you'll have two types of players, if you will. You have the people that will come in, okay, and sit there, want to enjoy, some food and some beverage and watch the games there. But based on my experience in recently, I visited the Mississippi Gulf Coast where I used to work, and a lot of people will pull up, go inside, place a wager, and then leave. So this is one of the reasons why we picked this location, and we will have some kiosks right there. However, we will also, we're also going to have a simulcast ability to wager on a simulcast, because we do see opportunity for crossover play in all of our amenities. We will also look at putting one in the Irish pub location, because again, we want to make it an atmosphere or amenity where people can eat and enjoy the games, and then make it locatable so that they can place a bet and without backing up that front entrance, which would be somewhat of a security concern. And we're also looking at putting one closer to that center bar, if not on the center bar, in our main casino floor.
Okay, and do you anticipate removing any slot machines as a result of placing those kiosks in different areas within the casino?
Absolutely not. No slot machines due to Sportsbook will be removed. Again, this was an area that was an electronics store that really, even if you want to add slot machines, it wouldn't be cohesive. It wouldn't be benefits to the customer to have it there. But no slot machines for the kiosks or for the Sportsbook will be removed.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Initial questions or comments from the board?
I do. Mr. Carlucci, I had a little bit of trouble following your description of the additional security preventing underage. Are you adding another entrance or a separate security spot for the sports book? Why would that be any different than what's set up currently just to get into the main casino?
I think we're enhancing our security, and I just wanted to point that out because we expect more volume in this location, and strategically looking, we've had incidences where minors were able to, it's a very wide entrance, and we've had incidences where somebody would distract somebody and be able to go around. By pulling it back, it narrows the gateway. And also, as I mentioned, putting that rail there, because we've had incidences, minors, frankly, will be minors, where somebody distracted it and they were able to go along the side. So by pulling it back, it makes the entrance smaller. And again, we believe we'll have more volume coming into this location, even if it's somebody running in to place a bet. So and of course we'll evaluate on peak days we'll probably add, or we will add, on peak days, more security in this location.
Thank you.
Mr. Alroy, when you were presenting on, actually, I guess it's page 2, but the first page past the cover sheet, and you were talking about your experience in New Jersey and what you anticipate in Pennsylvania, I wasn't clear as to whether your New Jersey experience is just online. Then you mentioned a retail operation, Sportsbook Resorts AC. Do you operate that as well?
So we operate both online and bricks and mortar in New Jersey.
Gotcha. So the size of what you do in New Jersey versus the size and scope of what you are presenting today in Pennsylvania, can you compare and contrast them for me?
Sure. So it's hard to compare. It's not apples to apples because of legislation is different. We have multiple skins on Sportsbook. That allowed us to partner with multiple partners online, so that it's hard to compare it apples to apples. On the bricks and mortar, it's actually more apples to apples, and I think there the comparison it's a little bit bigger. We have a bigger space there.
In New Jersey, there.
New Jersey, that's right. Yes, but besides that, in terms of the technology that's behind it, the screens and the lounges and the actual offering is the same.
Mr. Carlucci?
Yeah. I also want to point out, as I mentioned earlier, they didn't have the benefit of having, we have Irish Pub located right across from it, and we plan on that being more of a like food and beverage outlet for this area. And it's literally right next to it. And we'll have service coming out of the Irish Pub for that. We'll probably down the road turn the Irish Pub into a sports restaurant or something.
Okay. And once, or assuming that your sports book is approved, do you have a timeline for implementation? Is the space already vacant? Can you just give us a sense of that?
So the space is already vacant. We're in the process. I think we want to be cautious with our timeline. I want to say early fall to launch it. We're probably going to launch it on the bricks and mortar side earlier than online. We're very much want to be ready for NFL season for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of questions, racing related. In your sportsbook facility, will you be showing any horse racing at all?
No.
On page 9 of your presentation, you reference 7 sports betting terminals and 3 teller booths. Any pari-mutuel wagering going on there? Racing related?
No, it's going to be very much a sports book. We have other spaces for pari-mutuel.
So on page 10 of your presentation, on the games offered, none of it is racing?
That's right.
Just so, I don't know if you're aware of this, or I guess this is where Treasury
Jen.
and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, or Treasury and Agriculture are here primarily for money, and the only reason Downs has a slot license is because of racetrack, is because of the racetrack that it has. So, I mean, racing is a concern, not only to the Department of Agriculture and to our funds in general, but, it's something you may want to consider.
I understand that. Is it been offered in any of the other facilities right now at the sports books?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there other questions? I guess I'd like to follow up. I was quite honestly surprised by that answer. It seems like a natural thing, and from what we've seen in other casinos that are offering sports books, there's a natural tie-in. I'm just curious why your initial decision, at least, was to not offer race betting
Mhm.
in the same facility.
I think that's a very, very valid point, and
I'm more interested in what was the thought process that led you to where you are.
I think it's more technically than that we don't want to offer it. I think it's, to Tony's point, it's something that we definitely would consider is just that we want to go and start as soon as possible and not add a lot of component from the beginning. But I think that's something that we certainly want to put in there.
I think I can clarify some of this, and I think there's
Please.
a little misunderstanding. We're planning on putting screens in the Irish Pub, which again is located right next to it, right? And we're also putting a kiosk so that you can bet on the simulcast there in that area. So, you know, we'll put up, you know, simulcast, and we've done it in the past. And we've had simulcast play on a casino floor. So in some of the areas throughout, there will be simulcast, and in that Irish Pub. I think the issue is, like, you know, on a Sunday when it's all sports book, you know, we can't say that we're going to have the horse racing that. But in that general area, there will be times that we'll have simulcast on the screens. So I think that may be a little bit of confusion.
Well, just as a follow-up, I think what we were seeing from many of the other license applications before us, where it was a Class 1 casino that had a racing thing, that the actual betting seemed to be a little more integrated, was the point that
And I don't want to
think
leave
was
with
being made.
I don't want to leave with the impression that we're not. I mean, we want all of our businesses to succeed. So it's not. Please don't think that we're leaving with the perception that we're not going to do that. We'll have it around that area, if not in it. I think the issue is like on a Sunday when there's like limited technology or screens, that would be the issue. But we'll have it.
Because from our limited experience so far, there seems to be evidence of bleed over.
Yes.
Present, and you're losing a synergism by not having that present. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business.
No, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I think there was a little confusion in our answer, but we will have it. I actually, as I mentioned earlier, I see the biggest crossover play, like we like to call it, between the poker customer and the simulcast customer.
Mm-hmm.
And as we mentioned in our presentation earlier, we'll also be looking at our OTB tracks to add, which we see as a huge benefit. And we think the whole package will be good for us and the state.
Okay. Any other follow-up questions from anybody up here? If
So we
not-
can, sorry, Mr. Chairman, can we do that a little bit more formally? I mean, in the petition for this certificate, Cyrus or Doug, can we put that as a condition?
You can place it in your order. The board can place that in their order if that's something that they want to see.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have a presentation, Enforcement Counsel?
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, Ferrell, Assistant Enforcement Counsel for the Office of the Enforcement Counsel. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not have a formal presentation. However, we do request to put the following statement of recommendation into the record.
I'm sorry. If you could repeat that.
Yes.
Just trying to keep things moving.
Yeah. The Office of Enforcement Counsel doesn't have a formal presentation today. However, we do request to put the following statement of recommendation into the record.
Okay.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel, along with the Bureau of Casino Compliance, the Bureau of Gaming Operations, Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, the Bureau of Gaming Laboratory Operations, and the Bureau of Licensing, along with the Office of Diversity and the Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling, have reviewed and consulted extensively on the petition and appendices filed by Downs Racing LP for a sports wagering certificate. After which, OEC filed an answer to this matter, requesting the board order the implementation of certain listed conditions, if it was so inclined to grant the relief requested in the petition. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the approval of Downs Racing LP's petition for a sports wagering certificate. However, we requested the issuance of a sports wagering certificate to Downs Racing LP be subject to the proposed conditions outlined in OEC's answer filed on April 11th in response to that petition, as well as any other conditions imposed by the board.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or reactions from petitioner?
Mr. Chairman, we have no objections to the conditions listed in Office of Enforcement Counsel's answer to our petition. And we would like to move our presentation into evidence.
So moved.
Thank you.
Any additional comments, questions? the board. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a motion for confidentiality pending with regard to our sports wagering petition. We ask for your consideration of that petition.
Okay, that's fine. If there's no other additional questions or comments from the board, we will take this matter under advisement and vote when we get to the Office of Chief Counsel's portion of the agenda. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And now,
Change of the guard.
change of the guard coming up. Okay. Downs' petition to modify the gaming floor.
No, it's already got this one.
Pull another chair up from behind you.
We have some new faces sitting here. Same thing, anybody who's going to be speaking today who's not an attorney, please stand and be sworn for the court reporter.
I've been sworn.
You're okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't sure earlier before this,
I
if I get up
understand.
again or not.
Well, if you want to stand,
I get a second.
we can sway you a second time. You might have a different answer.
I'm telling the truth 200%.
That's fine. All right, then. Petitioners, you can begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Christopher Soriano, Soriano, with the law firm Dwayne Morris, LLP. Also with me from Dwayne Morris is Samantha Haggerty, Haggerty, here on behalf of the petitioners, Downs Racing LP, on the petition to modify the gaming floor plan. The petition sets forth in detail the proposed changes to the gaming floor. With me today to testify and give the presentation and answer any questions the board or the Office of Enforcement Counsel may have is Anthony Carlucci, President and General Manager, who the board has already heard from this morning, Gary DeWitt Jr., the Assistant General Manager, and Sunil McCool, Director of Casino Operations. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Carlucci.
Okay.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Are you going to be putting slides up? So this is just a brief of the agenda we'll be going over today. We could probably just go, right to the overall. But we're here today to request permission to upgrade our gaming experience. I want to stress that we believe there will be no reduction in revenue and staffing. And as we go through the occupancy number, I think you'll see that that's evident. We're requesting to close our original casino, which was built in 1965, and it has some leaking issues and things of that nature. But I want to stress that's not the main reason why we're closing is that the machines that are down there are just not needed. And as we go through occupancy, I believe you'll see that. And we also believe that it'll enhance our gaming experience because, again, it's an older facility, about a football field away from our main facility. That in all candor, it probably should have been closed when we opened up our phase 2 at that time. But there was a reason for it at that time, which I'm not aware of. But the machines are just not needed, we believe. We want to relocate our poker room, as I touched on briefly earlier. Probably getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we do see this crossover play. But more important than that, to this day, the property on our main floor has been open for 10 years, and to this day, I've been stopped by customers, and they'll say, oh, you don't have poker. And we do have poker, but the issue is it's just so far off the beaten path. Through my experience, even signage, okay, people don't read signs, unfortunately, okay, and it's just, it's.
They don't want to walk 300 feet.
Well, that too, and again, it's an older section of the building. It's not a great experience, in all honesty. So, we want to relocate this poker room. We do see the synergies, the crossover play in this area, along with, which was kind of earlier, that we do see, simulcast customers also batting up in that area. We also believe that we're going to better utilize our high limit square footage, because at the time, sometimes when you're dealing with these big casinos, things are put on the floor that are just not needed, but you do it for aesthetics looks. As we go through the presentation, you'll see we have 18 poker tables, but only 8 of them are ever opened. But if you took them off the floor, you're going to have an empty-looking space that just, what do you do with it type of thing. And we have a little bit of that in our high limit where we have 3 or 4 table games that are never opened. Now, they were put there originally for like a high-end customer that just requested, I want to buy myself over there. I've never seen it before in all the places I've worked at, but they're just not needed. What is needed in our high limit is some more slot machines that we do plan to add to it. We're also going to be adding, as you're well aware, in Pennsylvania, slightly over 50% of the floor has to be non-gaming as far as square footage, right? But you can have machine counts, okay, that are, exaggerating, double what they are in the non-smoking, depending on what you designate as far as smoking to non-smoking based on square footage. We're actually going to be adding slot machines, non-smoking slot machines to our area, where we're going to have more non-smoking slot machines than slot machines that are in the smoking section. So I would like to turn it over to Gabby to go through some of the numbers. So.
Please state and spell your name for the court.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Gary DeWitt, Garydewitt. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So on this next slide, it just shows our year over year in regards to our gross terminal revenue, just a graphical representation of where we peaked in 2011 to where we're currently stabilizing in the calendar year 2018. To the right is just a brief summary of when the facility first opened, how many slot machines we had, to what our current count is now, and then a brief rundown of what our requested reduction is by area. So if so approved, we want to reduce the floor by 405 slot machines. And then I will talk about, myself and Sunil will talk about each particular area just so you have an understanding and flavor of each area. If, again, approved, we'd like to have 1,920 slot machines on our gaming floor. On the next slide, as we continually do, we analyze our gaming floor, our slot floor, our table game revenue consistently. And one of the things we look at is our occupancy. So in the last calendar year, 2018, and actually you can even count 2019 as well, we took our top 5 coin-in per hour and occupancy per hour days and analyzed those. At our absolute peak in 2018, this is over 1 hour of one gaming day, we peaked at just slightly over 1,700 slot machines, which at 2,325 games is just a little bit over 74%. Again, if approved, we would still have, with our absolute peak, and again, this was our highest day of 2018, we'd still have over 200 slot machines available to our customers. And then to the right is, just showing for the calendar year on an average Wednesday, our average occupancy is a little over 13%. On Saturday, if you average all the hours, around 26%. And then for the year, we average right around 19% or 430 slot machines in play at any one time. With that in mind, Mohegan Sun is truly committed to the property from our capital investment side, not just in gaming, but in our non-gaming amenities as well. Since 2008, we've invested over $44 million in our slot product. Particularly in the last 2.5 years, we've really been focused on keeping our floor as fresh as possible. So we've actually added, swapped out, replaced over 500 slot machines on our gaming floor in the last 2.5 years, something we're very proud of. Also, again, in regards to our commitment is also the experience our customers have in the non-gaming space. We've added, as Tony mentioned earlier, we've actually added an Irish pub, Molly O'Shea's. We've added a new Italian food offering, a slice, it's a pizza place, etc. We actually remodeled our hotel lobby and bar space. And again, if approved, one of our most exciting projects is our sports betting. We just talked about our sports book. And we'll stress that with this in mind, no additional reductions in slot machines will be requested. Again, We did just recently, in September of 2018, replaced all the carpet around what we call the river. It's basically the walkway around the casino. And then also in late 2016, early 2017, we actually replaced all of the carpet throughout the gaming floor as well, which is quite a task and project. Pardon this graphical representation. It's about the best we could do trying to show the overall facility, including our phase one. If you look to the kind of the right is the two spaces that have the green highlights around them. That's our original casino, or phase one, and they really are, it's a two-floor situation. And then as you go down a little bit, you'll see kind of a small walkway there. That's that 300 feet or over football field that we refer to that gets our guests to our main gaming and non-gaming, basically the entire facility. So on the bottom right-hand portion, which we're going to talk about, highlighted in blue, is the proposed new poker room space. On the very north of it is what we're going to talk about regarding the high-limit repositioning. And then to the left, in orange, is where we currently have 9 table games that we want to remove and add 73 slot machines. So that's a brief overview of the casino.
May I interject just very briefly? To the direct right of the blue section, which is the new proposed poker room, the smaller rectangle, that's the sports book that you showed us earlier.
Yes, ma'am. As you walk directly up in that main entrance where that kind of diamond is.
Right, so the diamond is the entryway, that little rectangle is the sports book, and then the big blue rectangle is what we're talking about now, the new poker room.
That'll be part of the poker room. There's slot machines in that space, and we're going to propose reducing some slots to add the poker room.
Right.
As well.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. So just some summary of the phase one, the original casino. Our proposal is to close this existing space. As we've discussed, it was built in 1965. It really is disjointed from the rest of the gaming floor. We are encountering some high maintenance costs in this space. As Tony mentioned earlier, some leaking, et cetera, some AC, electrical, et cetera. We just believe that we can better utilize both our operating funds and our capital funds in locations that would benefit our guests and our team members better. Overall, in this particular space, there are 383 slot machines with an average age of over 11 years old. Again, we want to relocate and remodel the poker room, and we don't project any reduction in revenue or staffing by closing this space. We will simply reallocate all of our team members to the main floor. And then lastly, just a brief summary about phase one. Extremely low occupancy in this space. As you can see, some of the revenue and coin-in fair share numbers. And then also just currently, there are 18 tables in this space that really well over half sit empty all of the time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sunil Muckle, who's our Director of Casino Operations.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The name is Sunil, S-U-N-I-L. Last name is M-U-K-U-L. So this slide, this is just a representation of the poker revenue, the decline year over year. We had peaked out at about a little over $4 million in 2011. Last year in 2018, we were a little bit over $2 million. So, the poker revenue has steadily been declining over the years, due to increased competition, other casinos opening upstate New York, Maryland, et cetera.
Could I interject a quick question? If you go back one slide, please. What point in this timeline did your permanent facility open?
The phase two?
Yes.
That opened in 2008. But this is only since 2010 because that's when we added table games and poker. So this is starting with...
Okay, I understand. I was just wondering whether some of the decline in poker revenue was once you had a flashy new thing and there was no poker there, people just stopped going to phase one. But this This graph doesn't show me that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So again, one of the things with the closure of Phase 1, we want to relocate that poker room to the main floor, put it in a more prominent location. The current room in Phase 1 is 18 tables, but again, with the decline in revenue, we believe 8 tables would be more than enough to accommodate our demand. That is pretty much what we are scheduling and opening on a daily basis right now. So. As Gary mentioned, the current room is outdated. We've had some issues with water, etc. Another part of it, again, is very isolated, so there's no opportunity for crossover play. So we believe, again, with it being adjacent to the sports book, very close to the table games, the main slot gaming floor, we will have that opportunity for people pique their interest, to try other areas of the casino as well. Also, increased visibility, guest comfort, proximity to the restaurants. Right now, there's really no food service offering down in Phase 1. Now, the poker room will be very close to the restaurants on the main gaming floor. And then we are committed, the capital spend to do this whole relocation is, over $400,000. This next slide just depicts the left is currently how that Penny Grove area is, where you see all the slot machines. The slide on the right, where you see the 8 green poker tables, that is the section that we are taking from the Penny Grove to relocate the poker. This is a photograph of the existing poker room in the Phase 1 area. And we have a couple artist renderings of the new space in that Penny Grove area. All right, the next area we're going to talk about is the high limit. So as Tony had mentioned earlier, we do have, there's currently 9 tables in the high limit room. We believe that's too many. We haven't opened 4 of them at all this current fiscal year. And we do have a demand for more high-limit slot machines. So the plan is to remove the 4 tables, add 16 high-limit slot machines to that area. These additional 16 machines will be non-smoking. So now we will have smoking and non-smoking games in the high-limit room. And again, just for more variety, more comfortable for the guests. This slide, again, just a diagram of, the space outlined in red on the right is where the new 16 slot machines would be placed. The slide on the left is the current configuration where the 4 tables are now. So, and I'll turn it back over to Gary.
Thank you, Sonny. And as the last portion of the presentation in regards to our proposal is we want to reduce 9 table games in our current non-smoking area of the gaming floor, and as we mentioned, add 73 slot machines to this space. This would get us to our 1,920 count. Also, too, at our center bar, our Sunburst bar. Right now, it's a circular bar, and we're going to segregate part of that as non-smoking as well. Currently, it's all smoking. We want to give our non-smoking customers an opportunity to sit at that center bar as well if they so choose. So that's also part of the presentation. And as we've continued to talk, is these 9 table games, we truly only open maybe 8 hours during the week on a Saturday night, maybe on a Friday night if peak demand. So they really do sit empty most of the time. So we believe we could actually generate more revenue, give our guests more opportunity for slot play. So again, to propose closing 9 table games in this space. And just a quick depiction of that as well is, as you can see, what we highlighted in red is where the 9 table games are currently. And then what we propose to do is add the 73 slot machines within that existing gaming square footage. And with that, in closing, I'm going to turn it over to Tony to talk about our summary and close it out.
So just in summarizing, obviously it's a large reduction in machine count. However, I do want to point out that, I'm sorry.
Can't hear you.
Okay, I apologize. But I just want to point out that although there's slightly over 2,300 machines, the most I've ever seen at the property in 3 years, for one night, it hit 1,700 machines in play. We just have too many machines that you just really don't need in a bad experience, or not, I don't say bad experience, but not as enhanced a gaming experience as our phase one. I also wholeheartedly believe that this will increase poker revenue because it's right off the floor. Hopefully, if we receive permission to add the sports book, it's in the prime location to do that. It's a better experience for the guest in a better overall atmosphere, and it also opens the door for future enhancements to the property, because you can't remodel an open casino type of thing, okay? But we believe that we can enhance the property. I can't disclose what it may be, but we believe that we can add some things to that area once it's fixed up that will draw people to the property and also have crossover play. So that is our
I want
presentation.
to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're saying that the area that would be vacated, that was one of the questions, is what were your future plans for use of that space?
We don't have exact plans yet. The first thing would be to do is to make sure that we fix leaks that are leaking. We've had to close the poker room several times on high rainy days because of the leaks, which we've had to work with our local enforcement. But that has to be fixed first, and I'm not ready to disclose because we're looking at several things that would be non-gaming amenities, but would draw people to the property and a different incremental business that we don't have now, such as going after like millennials and things of that nature and thinking about the future. But first, obviously we would have to close it. We've tossed around several things. I really don't want to say publicly because then people will think you're definitely doing it. But I mean, we have plans to do something in that location because it does us no good to have an asset sitting there. So.
Right. Okay. Is that the end?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Questions or comments from Enforcement Council?
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. John Crowe, C-R-O-H-E, for the Office of Enforcement Council. Yes, we do have a few follow-up questions. Are any of the slot machines that are on the list to be terminated progressive slot machines?
Yes, they will be, and as we do with all of our moves, et cetera, we will work with our TFR to ensure that all the proper progressive transfers take place before they're physically removed from the floor.
Thank you. How many? And approximately how many of those machines are progressive?
I would have to get back. I wouldn't want to estimate, John. I'll get back to you with that number.
Thank you. And how do you believe that reducing the number of poker tables that you currently have available will affect poker revenue?
Would you like me to handle that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sir. As we mentioned earlier, is where the poker room currently is located. It really is, if I put a term, kind of out of sight, out of mind. We have our regulars, but there really are, even to this day, guests that ask the question if we have poker. So we certainly believe that where it's going to move to, if approved, is the visibility is going to be fantastic. We're going to get some synergies with the sports book, but also what wasn't mentioned is the location that it's, again, we hope it's going to go is right across from our table games area as well. So the location and the general synergies of that main entrance now is going to drive traffic to that space. So we believe that at the very least, it won't reduce. If anything, we believe it'll go up because of that, those reasons.
Okay, even though you're reducing the actual number of the tables.
That's correct, because we don't open that many tables anyhow.
Okay. Are the 73 slot machines that are being added to the non-smoking area the same machines that you're removing from what will be the new poker room, or are you getting brand new machines into the facility?
No, currently we're going to take, there's 109 machines being removed from the Penny Grove area. We're going to take those games and place them temporarily, at least to fill the spots, John, in that space. And then, as we always do, once we get them in their locations, we'll analyze the floor and decide what are the best locations for continual capital improvements.
Okay, and do you have an estimate on the average age of the slot machines that are being moved to a different part of the gaming floor? Are they older machines or newer machines?
It's a mixture, from particularly because the games in the Penny Grove area, there are some newer games in there, John. Again, I wouldn't want to speculate on the age. I can certainly get that to you. But the games out of Phase 1, as mentioned earlier, they're our most dated machines, most over 10 years old.
Okay. And to follow up on a point you made earlier, you believe that reducing the number of high-limit table games available but increasing the number of high-limit slots available will hopefully positively affect revenue at the facility?
That's our hope.
Okay. Okay, and if the board should grant this petition today, when do you anticipate the entire project to be complete?
We believe it'll take us around 180 days to complete this, based on the bids, et cetera, received from our general contractors to complete the poker room, and of course all the moves that then relate to that.
Okay, but that would not include any potential upgrades to the existing Phase 1? That would essentially, area would still be closed off after 180 days?
That's correct. That would, yes, exactly. So from the time we start to when we could get Phase 1 physically closed, and then after that 6 months, we would then, as Tony mentioned, we've already engaged talking with some individuals, but that would then happen thereafter.
Okay.
Mr. Carlucci, just by way of history, since you weren't here, but back in 2006, when that green area, the original part of Mohegan Sun that was open, once that was opened, those slots weren't removed from that area. And then when table games came online in 2010, slots were removed and placed in different areas, and then to make room for table games. And then at that time, the GM of Mohegan believed that the poker players wanted to be away from the casino floor, and they thought they could get some ancillary business also in the slots in that area. But obviously that has not taken place. So you think that this proposal is something to create some synergy within the main building. So with regard to the racing, as Mr. Augusto pointed out so vehemently, how do you plan to further integrate racing now that there's no reason or wouldn't be any reason for anyone to walk in that direction or really outside of that main circle of the casino floor? How do you plan to integrate racing onto the main casino floor? You talked about offering pari-mutuel wagers. You talked about showing races. Is there any thought to adding pari-mutuel counters in that area?
I think that, again, there was a misunderstanding of how something was worded earlier. Okay, we're going to be putting some simulcast into the sports book. It is, how much, and I think the thought process was possibly, somebody was thinking about just Sundays, that type of thing. We're going to integrate the simulcast with this area. All right, and it's going to work out in the sports book. It's going to work out in the area of Molly O'Shea's. We'll probably put, on screens, possibly even a kiosk, okay, into where the poker is at. It also has a service board that can, do that, because we see the biggest crossover play again in the poker customer and the table games customer. So we will be integrating the simulcast in several areas. And also one final point that you mentioned, and again, a GM at that time made the decision that may have been very well been the right decision at that time. But we see this as prime opportunity because of the aging of the property, the issue that we're adding sportsbook, and it is slightly secluded from the main casino floor because it's over across the aisle in that location, right? And it's not right out in the middle of the floor. So you're kind of like looking at all things being considered, best for the poker customer.
Is that, you going to follow up on that? Are you moving on to another subject now, Cyrus?
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
What I thought I heard Cyrus's question was a slightly different question, or maybe my question is slightly different. Once you, I'm using the terms on purpose, once you basically abandon those areas for everything other than racing, if you're not getting enough, you're not drawing enough traffic there when you have poker and some slot machines, physically, what's going to be done to encourage people to go to the racetrack once there's only one reason to go there?
Fair enough.
It's a physical problem. I understand the pari-mutuel and all the rest, but you're now going to have, and even if you put a restaurant there, whatever, what's going to cause people? The whole idea was to have table games and slot machines to, among other things, encourage more handle at the racetrack. And physically, now once we do this, absent whatever else you intend to do, there's going to be a total physical separation. If people didn't want to walk 300 feet to go play poker, what's going to cause them to go over there to go place a bet?
In the race book. In the race book. Well, honestly, 99% of the race book customers come there now, and there's different entrance for the racetrack. I know that's not your question, but I do want to. 99% of the racetrack customers that go there for the racetrack are coming in the old main entrance.
Mm-hmm.
But again, by putting the screens up, showing the simulcast races, and we're not opposed to putting up signage to say where it's down there. How exactly I can draw customers to the racetrack, particularly based on racetrack, I'm not sure at this point. In all honesty, it's a very tough industry to get new customers to go there.
I guess what I'm trying to understand here, and perhaps George was going to ask this question, so now you're being twice preempted.
Yeah.
Is you're running two separate operations here. You have a gaming operation, you have a horse track. I haven't heard any consideration of what the impact of this is going to be on the horse side of your operation.
Well, I view this as an opportunity for, if they're closing this area and that project is still up in the air, that they seriously consider integrating racing into that part of the area, things that would draw people to that area and also draw them to the racing side. So I would seriously encourage them to take the opportunity, if the board approves this petition, to use that closed space to integrate racing further into that facility.
Good. Any question?
We would concur with that. The Racing Commission would absolutely concur with that.
Yeah. Well, I just guess I was wondering
We're
without you
certainly
getting,
not opposed to that.
without asking for your specific plans, we usually spend all our time thinking about the gaming side of the operation, but your physical layout presents unique problems, and we all understand that. And the whole idea of adding gaming to horse racing was to produce some synergies, and now you're going to be physically making it even harder on the racing side of the operation. I'm just wondering, what had you thought about that as you were making these other plans?
The only thing without disclosing is, and the only thing that we believe is by adding something that's a non-gaming amenity, draw people to that area, and then while they're at a non-gaming amenity, they're more than likely to do it. Because I can.
I'll take that for now.
Okay.
That's fine. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cyrus.
No, I'm done. I just wanted to encourage them to integrate racing into that closed area now that they have the opportunity to do so.
Are there questions or comments from the board? I'm sure there are. Mark?
There's a couple of us that are, I believe, touring there on Friday, so maybe you could highlight those areas for us.
I'm conducting a tour, and I'll be glad to.
And I'll wear my Fitbit.
Kathy?
Yeah. Can we put the overall property map up on the big screen just so they can. There you go. It was on my screen. It just wasn't up there. So I want to understand what I'm looking at here today. The two areas off to the right that have the green sections that you're phasing are really, that's a split. That's a one building, like the little key that's at the bottom there, and those are on top of each other. But so it's kind of like this three-sectioned arm off of your circle, right? Now, is the racetrack, like, I'm just looking at that one area and wondering, is that the grandstand and the racetrack is just right over, further to the right, so to speak?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So it's yeah, exactly like you said. The two greens are really on top of each other. It's one building, and then you're right, to the upper right, a little bit further down, that's where the racetrack is.
Okay. Now, so I that part I am now picturing. I'm going to go back to the circle, the main thing. Where is that circular bar that now is all smoking, and you're going to make some slots on that bar non-smoking? Is that the thing that's literally in the physical center of that circle?
Yes, it is. It's literally right in the middle.
Okay, so it seems to me there's no natural division for, unless you're just going to take two machines and say these two machines are non-smoking machines. So if I'm sitting in a non-smoking machine, Dave's sitting at the smoking machine with his cigarette. Is that literally what's going on there?
To some degree, yes, but we are actually going to remove a couple slot machines from the center of that bar just to show a little separation between the two. But
so is the, not being, but part of what I recall when I read the more detailed package in preparation of this meeting is that there is, in the overall scheme of things, though still meeting the board's requirement, there is a small overall reduction in the percentage of space that is non-smoking in this proposal. So are we kind of just pretending that we're not decreasing the non-smoking even more by sticking two machines here versus, I mean, I guess where I'm trying to go is how realistic is that those are really non-smoking machines, and that the non-smoking experience is not being further diminished in addition to some of the other things that we've talked about.
Well, I'm sorry.
All right.
Let me answer the one part, and I'm going to have you guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to have you guys answer on the bar itself. But I do want to point out that this entire phase one is non-smoking. So, and many times there's 30 people playing down there. So in a way, we're kind of cheating the system by having that, because it's just such a huge space that nobody's up there. And you're basically saying to people, oh, you know, and we have non-smoking up in our main section. I want to make that point. But you're driving people down to this huge space that's all non-smoking.
So you're saying your old square footage that delineated smoking versus non-smoking included those green areas, not just the area in the circle?
Yeah, that's correct. That's all part of our gaming square footage.
So what you're saying to me now, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that in the circle, which if approved would be the extent of the Mohegan Sun gaming experience, you're actually increasing square footage in that round for non-smokers?
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay. Was there something else that you wanted? I mean, I'm satisfied with the answer.
I just wanted to make sure we, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say out of the reduction, the 405 game reduction, we're reducing the smoking machine count by 320. We're reducing the non-smoking machine count by 85. So
technically on the floor there are more non-smoking machines under the new plan versus under the current plan.
that is correct.
Okay. When, and I apologize, I can't remember who was talking about the poker tables coming upstairs, and that because of the visibility and the synergy, you believe it will increase poker revenue. And I saw those slides, I understood that. My question is, increase poker revenue absolutely irrespective of slot revenue, or increase poker revenue at the expense of an anticipated reduction in slot revenue?
I'll answer that. We don't see any reduction in the slot revenue at all, and we believe that if anything, we will increase the poker revenue because of the location and the proximity to the other amenities we're adding.
Okay, so that increase would be just poker today versus poker in the future comparison?
Correct, incremental poker, yeah.
Okay.
That is correct. And again, it's just a matter of the stress is that the machines in this area, frankly, nobody's playing them.
Okay. Jen?
I do have a question for Enforcement Council. Do we do any kind of assessment when this gaming floor proposal is for reduction of slot machines? I mean, this is probably one of the biggest that we've seen is the reduction of slot machines. I guess Treasury's obvious concern is revenues to the Commonwealth and the gaming fund. Did we do any kind of assessment that these are really non-revenue producing slot machines, or can we, you know, when we get these proposals?
Yeah, so BIE's FIU did a report which basically confirmed the proposition that a majority of the slot machines that are being moved or terminated are low-producing slot machines.
And when we say low producing, it's in relation to everything else, or when we say low producing, it's in relation to, is it relation to everything else at Mohegan, or, okay.
In relation to what's on Mohegan Sun's floor right now.
Correct. 262 of the slot machines are in the lowest 25th percentile
Okay.
of the gaming terminal revenue at Mohegan Sun.
Okay, I mean, that's just a main concern for Treasury is when we see a reduction in slot machines, I mean, whether you like it or not, or whether any casino wants to believe it or not, the Commonwealth is the biggest revenue producer out here. You guys are secondary, we're the biggest one. And so that is a main concern for Treasury. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one last thing. If I could ask in the future that if there are any reductions, additions, any changes to the racetrack facility, the building, anything touching. I understand that this was a gaming proposal, but it impacts racing. Would you please provide notice and appropriate petition to the commission, to the State Racing Commission? That'd be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. We
Thank
did.
you.
If no one else has questions, I have a few. Did you? Try to be brief. I know we're getting pretty long here. You have a unique situation here because you're a physical location. And you've made a compelling argument that you can close this down with no reduction in revenue and all the rest. But just humor me. You're really in an all or nothing proposition relating to the phase one. It might be, if you had total flexibility, that the actual reduction of slot machines might be some number different than 380 or whatever. But in a sense, you're either shutting that down or you're not. And what you can move over is limited by the space limitations that you have in phase two. But humor me. For you to say that that's the optimal level, it's really, I believe, the optimal level giving the physical restraints that you're operating under. Is that fair? In other words, if you had other space, perhaps you might decide that you want to have more than 200 extra slot machines around at a peak time, but you don't really have that flexibility because leaving extra machines over in phase one as you move everything over is just going to make it even more of a wasteland, okay? But if you had the space, the total flexibility, would the reduction necessarily be 385 or might it be 200? I'd like to understand that. I want to understand how much of this decision, we are faced with physical limitations here, but I want to understand how much of this decision is a function of the physical limitations of your space as opposed to what might be optimal.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman, fair enough. You know, obviously the space closing of phase one is very big, but I can stress to you this, if we were opening this casino today, we would be going with this number, perhaps even less. At best, 1,700 machines in play for one night in the past 3 years at the peak time, and very little, maybe 1 hour in a whole year, and still being just at 1,700 when you have 1,900 machines. It wouldn't make sense to open it up. If I was presenting to open this casino today in the present location, I would be going with this number of slot machines or less.
Okay. Would you say the same thing about the number of table games that you're going to have available? To what extent is that also, after you do all this, in the perfect world, is the right number 8 instead of 18, or is the right number 10 or 12 instead of 18?
For poker?
Yes.
8, I believe 8 is the right number. I think.
But is that because of the physical limitations?
No.
So if you had another several hundred square feet available to you, you wouldn't put 10 in instead of 8 or something?
No. No, I wouldn't. I mean, you could debate, we can look at numbers and say, would you put 9?
Okay.
That could be debatable in all honesty.
Okay.
Right? But again, when you have 18 tables and at most you're opening 8.
Okay, now the punchline. We're talking about what's inside the circle. You have the ring around the circle. It's like the same area that you're going to be using for your high limit poker. All the rest of that area is a decision you've made about how much of this total space is going to be spent on gaming versus other ancillary things like restaurants or whatever else lies outside of the river. Is it possible that portions of the area outside the river might be more profitable if they were given over to table games or slot machines?
I don't believe so, but we would certainly analyze that at the
Well, I was
present
wondering
time.
if you did analyze that as you were deciding to make these decisions, or you assumed that everything outside the ring was going to be left alone.
No, we did look at that at this point, and at this point, we believe that this is the right number. We did look at that.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? If not, Enforcement Council, do you have a presentation or?
The Office of Enforcement Council does not have a public presentation today. However, we respectfully request that should the board grant Mohegan Sun's petition to modify its gaming floor, that the approval be made subject to the 11 conditions set forth in the Office of Enforcement Council's April 5th, 2019 answer.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from petitioners?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we concur with the conditions set forth by the Office of Enforcement Council. Would have no objection to following those conditions should the board be inclined to grant the relief requested.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the presentation that was made into evidence, make it part of the record.
Yes, so moved.
And if I may call to the board's attention that with the petition, we filed a motion to protect confidential information in terms of the exhibits that were attached to the petition that contained the detailed schematics, and I would ask that that information to be maintained as confidential as well.
I understand. Anything else at this moment?
No, and that we have no objection to the motion.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments from the board, we're going to take a brief recess, go into executive session, and then we'll come back and pick up your matter later in this meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Office of Financial Management, third quarter budget report. Dave?
Good morning, Chairman, board members. Today I'd like to provide a report of expenses through the end of the third quarter of the fiscal year. Spending through the end of the fiscal year is well within budgeted amounts. For the first 3 quarters, expenditures totaled $28,947,000, and that's against a total appropriation of $46,153,000. For the first 3 quarters, expenses were up 3.4% against the same period last year. Spending for the third quarter alone was $9.8 million. By category, payroll expenses totaled $25.3 million. That's 87.4% of board expenses for the first 3 quarters. Benefits as a percentage of salaries totaled 69%. That is consistent with the figure from the previous year. Year-to-date payroll is up 3.2% due to salary increases and several additional employees on payroll due to gaming expansion. The average employee count for the first 3 quarters is 296, up from 292 last year. In the operating and fixed asset categories of expenses, expenditures total $1.5 million for the quarter, bringing the year-to-date total to $3.6 million. Operating fixed asset expenses comprise 12.6% of the board's overall expenses year-to-date. By category within operating expenses, rentals and leases totaled $1.2 million, or 34% of overall operating expenses. The second largest category was services, which contributed $1 million, or 28% to operating expenses to date. This category includes directors and officers insurance, fees for fingerprints used in background investigations, and interagency billings, among other expenses. Finally, the third largest category of operating expenses at $661,000, or 18% of operating expenses, is other operating expenses, which predominantly includes database services utilized in background investigations. The 3 categories that I mentioned, rental, services, and other operating expenses, account for nearly 80% of the year-to-date operating expenses. That concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Questions from the board? Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Doug Sherman, Office of Chief Counsel.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Our first agenda item relates to a final form regulation, which Assistant Chief Counsel Chad Zimmerman is here to present.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. As Chief Counsel indicated, our next agenda item is a regulation packet. It is final form regulation packet number 125-205 regarding the incorporation of side wagers and game modifications into existing table game rules of play and the table game rules of play for a new game. What we are presenting for the board's consideration today incorporates numerous side wagers or bonus wagers for table games that are currently in play that have previously been adopted by the board as statements of policy. Specifically, we are incorporating the 6-card bonus wager into the games 4-card poker, Let It Ride poker, Texas Hold'em poker, Ultimate Texas Hold'em poker, Mississippi Stud, and Crazy 4 poker. Updates and modifications are being made to the existing progressive wagers, namely to the seed and reseed amounts, incrementation rates, and pay tables for wagers for Caribbean Stud poker, 4-card poker, Let It Ride poker, Texas Hold'em poker, Ultimate Texas Hold'em poker, Mississippi Stud, and Crazy 4 poker. Additionally, the touchdown roulette bonus is being incorporated into the rules of play for roulette, and the bad beat bonus is being added to Ultimate Texas Hold'em poker. In terms of other non-wager modifications, minor procedural changes are being made to sick bow, poker, and 3-card prime. The last part of the regulatory packet is Chapter 684A, 4-card frenzy. This is a new table game where it's a 4-card poker game where the player competes against a dealer to create the best 4-card poker hand out of 5 dealt cards. This table game in this regulatory packet was previously adopted as a proposed rulemaking and is now being being put into final form, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this regulatory material.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board on these matters? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the final form regulation number 125-205 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next before the board are 5 petitions for your consideration. 2 of the petitions were heard earlier today during public hearings. The remaining petitions will be decided on the record by agreement of the parties. In each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all documents of the contained within the record. Excuse me. The first petition is Downs Racing's request to obtain a sports wagering certificate. The matter was heard by the board earlier this morning, and should the board approve the request for a sports wagering certificate, to be clear, it will not be authorizing the licensee to commence the operation of its sports wagering immediately, but rather sports wagering will only begin after the submission of the platform, any testing materials that need to be reviewed, a review of the on-site premises, and approvals given by the board and the executive director, which includes the completion of a successful test period. As with all prior sports wagering petitions the board has heard, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has requested a number of conditions to be placed upon this certificate. Downs also has requested that certain portions of the record be maintained as confidential, which we agree should be maintained as confidential. And with that, the motion is ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Downs Racing LP's petition for a certificate to conduct sports wagering as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I also further move that Downs Racing LP's motion for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The next matter is Downs Racing's petition to modify its gaming floor. Obviously, we heard this just a few minutes ago. They seek to relocate the poker room to a more convenient location, moving it from the original racetrack building to the main floor of the casino. Additionally, they're requesting permission to remove 405 slot machines, 13 bank table games, and 10 non-bank poker tables, ultimately reducing the gaming floor space by 17,500 square feet, which represents the area down in the original Phase 1 area. As indicated, this is closing that space in the racetrack building, which will be repurposed at a later date. If Downs' request is approved, the Office of Enforcement Counsel proposed a number of conditions which were outlined in their answer, into which Downs had acquiesced in. Downs has also again requested that exhibits submitted as part of their petition remain as confidential. We would agree that the confidentiality would be appropriate for those matters, and the matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve Down Racing LP's petition for modification of the gaming floors described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I further move that Down Racing LP's motion for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next 3 matters are all documentary in nature and relate to shared service agreement. The first is Churchill Downs Incorporated and LLNPA, which is the management company overseeing Nemacolin Woodlands. Is their petition seeking the approval of an administrative services agreement and a reorganization of the corporate structure. By way of background, recently the board approved the transfer of interest whereby Churchill Downs purchased Eldorado Resorts ownership interest in IOCPA. That resulted in a complete change of ownership and control of the management company of Nemacolin Woodlands. The parties here are first requesting that Churchill Downs be permitted to provide administrative services to LLN, which again is the Lady Luck Casino Management Company. Additionally, the second part of this is that the parties are requesting a change in the corporate structure. Currently, Nemacolin's management company and Presque Isle Downs are both directly and wholly owned subsidiaries of HCRH LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Churchill Downs. The reorganization of the corporate structure would result in HCRH relinquishing its ownership of LLN to PID or Presque Isle Downs, making the Nemacolin Management Company the direct and wholly owned subsidiary of Presque Isle Downs. In essence, it was taking them from two companies that sat side by side and moving the Nemacolin Management Company underneath in the structure. Under both structures, the ultimate parent company remains Churchill Downs. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the relief requested, subject to conditions outlined in the answer. Additionally, they have no objection to the request for confidentiality of certain information in the petition. We would agree that the confidential information or confidentiality should be extended to that information, and that matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Churchill Downs Incorporated and LLNPA LLC's joint petition for approval of administrative services agreement and reorganization of corporate structure as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I further move that the request for confidentiality be approved in part, as will be explained further in the board's order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board is Churchill Downs Incorporated and PID LLC's joint petition requesting approval of an administrative services agreement. The parties to this joint petition are requesting that Churchill Downs be permitted to provide administrative services to Presque Isle Downs, its wholly owned subsidiary. This is very much like the last administrative service agreement, just for the second property. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the relief requested, subject to the conditions that have been outlined. There also is a request that certain information be maintained as confidential, which we would agree would be appropriate, and the matter is ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Churchill Downs Incorporated and PID LLC's joint petition for approval of administrative services agreement as described by the Office of Chief Counsel and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I further move that the request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final petition before the board is Washington Trotting Association and Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association's petition for the approval of a corporate and shared services assessment agreement. In October 2018, Washington Trotting Association and Pinnacle Entertainment became subsidiaries of Penn National Gaming, which also owns Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association. In December of 2018, WTA and Mountain View filed a request that is now the request that is now before the board, and subsequently submitted exhibits that include the corporate overhead and shared services assessment agreement between Penn National Gaming and WTA, and the amended and restated corporate overhead and shared service assessment agreement between Penn National and Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association. The agreements detail the corporate overhead and shared services that Penn National agrees to provide to both entities. The Mountain View agreement will also be utilized by the two Category 4 casinos when they commence operations at some point in the future. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the request, subject to conditions. A confidentiality motion was also filed with respect to certain information in the agreements. We would agree that confidentiality would be appropriate. This matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Washington Trotting Association LLC and Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association LLC's joint petition for approval of corporate overhead and shared services assessment agreement as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I further move that the petitioner's request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good afternoon. I think the board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw the applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals: Barbara Kinney, Ludwig Kolmadin, Mark Yingling, Robin Spira, David Van Egmond, Ralph John Nicoletti, Douglas Albrecht, Richard Chung, John Paul Botel, Manu Sachindra Gambir. In addition to the withdrawals and surrenders I just mentioned, Stadium Casino Investors, LLC, filed a petition seeking to withdraw its application as well as that of 23 individuals or entities associated with it, as well as to surrender the license of one individual. And finally, NRT Sightline, Inc. filed a request to withdraw 14 applications of individuals and entities associated with it. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to any of these withdrawals or surrenders, and as a result, if the board were to grant same, they'd be doing so without prejudice to all of these parties.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue the order to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 6 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. These reports and recommendations, along with the complete evidentiary record, have been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. And additionally, in each case, the person or entity that was the subject of the report and recommendation has been notified that the matter would be taken up by the board today and that they could come forward and briefly address the board if they so chose. If any of these persons are present, I'd ask them to come forward when their matter is called if they wish to address the board. The first report and recommendation pertains to a request to place Robert Burkholder on the board's involuntary exclusion list. By way of background, on October 1st, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Burkholder on the exclusion list, alleging that he cheated while playing Mississippi stud poker at the Lady Luck Casino. Specifically, he was marking cards by bending them in the corners or in the middle. He was not criminally charged for this conduct. However, Mr. Burkholder was permanently evicted from Lady Luck Casino. The hearing in this matter was held on January 17th, 2019. The Office of Enforcement Counsel attended the hearing, presenting documentary and testimonial evidence. Mr. Burkholder also attended the hearing, cross-examining OEC's witnesses and testifying on his own behalf. The testimony and evidence presented at the hearing showed that on May 9th, 2018, Mr. Burkholder had bent cards on approximately 80 occasions over a 3-hour period of time, bending high-numbered cards in the corner and low-numbered cards in the middle. Surveillance video later reviewed showed the same conduct occurred between May 4th and May 6th of 2018 when Mr. Burkholder also bent a large number of cards while playing poker. Mr. Burkholder's defense in this matter was essentially based upon the idea that because the state police declined criminal prosecution, he could not be placed on the board's exclusion list. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the report and recommendation issued by the hearing officer recommends that Mr. Burkholder, in fact, be placed on the board's exclusion list, and that's the recommendation for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the placement of Robert Burkholder on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Kenneth Hairston's report and recommendation is next before the board today. On November 9th, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition requesting that Mr. Hairston be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list, alleging that during January of 2018 he cheated while gaming at Sugar House Casino. Specifically, while playing Easy Baccarat, Mr. Hairston moved a $40 wager placed on the player hand to the banker hand once the outcome of the game was known. He later pass-posted a $280 wager, and then upon realizing that the wager was lost, took his $280 from the table and quickly left the casino, re-entering later that day after changing clothes. Upon his re-entry, he was identified as the person who took the $280 earlier and was arrested. Additionally, testimony and evidence presented at the hearing showed that Mr. Hairston had other earlier similar incidents of pass-posting and pinching bets at the Parks Casino in 2014 and 2016. Mr. Hairston, in his own defense, testified that he understands that he is not allowed to enter Sugar House. They permanently evicted him from their property, but he did not believe he should be excluded from Parks or any other casino in the Commonwealth by the board's exclusion list because those casinos in and of themselves took no action against him. And the recommendation ultimately of the hearing officer is that he in fact be placed on the exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding the placement of Kennard M. Harrison on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board pertains to MJK Electrical Corporation. On January 31st, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for emergency suspension of this company and their gaming service provider certification after receiving notice that George J. Peltz, the vice president and 49% owner of MJK Electrical Corporation, had been charged and pled guilty to four felony criminal offenses, including tax evasion, failing to pay payroll taxes, and theft from employee benefits plans. Specifically, the evidence presented at the February 28, 2019 hearing showed that Mr. Peltz was retaining company money and utilizing a corporate credit card for personal use. He also paid employees in cash for overtime, thereby avoiding payroll taxes. He also directed false payroll reports be issued to local unions. Mr. Peltz did not contest these allegations in the criminal proceedings or before the board. As a result, the report and recommendation issued recommends that MJK Electrical Corporation's gaming service provider registration remain suspended.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of MJK Electrical Corporation's gaming service provider certification as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board is the report and recommendation regarding David Lynn. Mr. Lynn was issued a gaming employee occupation permit and was employed as a table games dealer at the Sugar House Casino. On January 31st, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for emergency suspension of Mr. Lynn's gaming employee occupation permit after receiving notice that he'd been charged in New Jersey with conspiracy to commit theft by deception, and credit card fraud. Specifically, it is alleged that between June 1st of 2017 and November 11th of 2017, Mr. Lynn engaged in a scheme to obtain merchandise and cash with stolen credit cards. As a result of these charges, the board's executive director issued an emergency order of suspension, and the matter went to a hearing before the Office of Hearings and Appeals on March 7th, 2019. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence. Mr. Lynn did not appear, and after hearing all of the evidence presented by Enforcement Counsel, the report and recommendation recommends that the suspension remain in place as the criminal charges remain pending against him.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of David Lynn's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
James Fonzo's matter is the next report and recommendation before the board. Mr. Fonzo was granted a gaming employee occupation permit in December of 2011 and worked as a table games dealer at Mohegan Sun until May of 2017 when he was promoted to a supervisory position. As a result of that promotion, Mr. Fonzo submitted an application seeking a G2 employee permit, which is required for the higher level position. Pending approval of his application, he's been working under a temporary G2 permit. The Office of Enforcement Counsel subsequently issued a notice recommending denial of Mr. Fonzo's G2 permit application based upon his criminal history, with his having several convictions and a less than honorable discharge from the United States Navy, all of those things happening between 1992 and 2007. Mr. Fonzo requested a hearing on the matter, and it was held on January 23rd, 2019. Both he and the Office of Enforcement Counsel attended that hearing and put on evidence. The evidence presented showed Mr. Fonzo had fully disclosed his criminal history and less than honorable discharge on his original gaming permit, his renewal gaming permit application, his renewal gaming permit application, as well as his G2 permit applications. Mr. Fonzo testified essentially that he turned his life around. He had a drug and alcohol problem for which he was now clean and sober. attends Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous meetings regularly, has never been disciplined by the casino, in fact has been promoted by the casino, and has 15 different gaming credentials. After considering all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that in fact Mr. Fonzo's G2 employee permit application be approved. And that's the recommendation to the board.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding James Fonzo's Gaming Level 2 Employee Occupation Permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Mr. Fonzo be granted a Gaming Level 2 permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Lamar Wesley. In November of 2017, Mr. Wesley submitted his second renewal application to renew his gaming employee occupation permit to continue working as a table games dealer at Chester Downs and Marina, LLC, which operates Harrah's, Philadelphia. The Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice recommending denial of Mr. Wesley's application based upon his noncompliance status with the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, his failure to file his 2014 and 2015 federal tax returns, his delinquency on student loans, as well as a separate federal tax lien that was filed against him, and his failure to comply with statement of conditions placed upon his permit when issued in 2015 to get several of these matters that existed at that time in order. After giving Mr. Wesley substantial time to come into compliance with his various financial and tax issues, both the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mr. Wesley appeared at a June 26, 2018 hearing before a hearing officer, offering testimony and documentary evidence to the hearing officer. At that time, Mr. Wesley provided evidence that he had entered into a payment plan on his student loan delinquency and also provided copies of agreements that he entered into with a business known as National Tax Experts, which were to assist him in resolving his tax issues. He further indicated that he had an appointment with the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue to get his issues resolved. As a result of that testimony, the hearing officer issued an order giving Mr. Wesley 4 months to submit additional evidence. He failed to provide any additional evidence during that time period, and another hearing was scheduled for February 5th, 2019. Again, both OEC and Mr. Wesley appeared. At that time, Mr. Wesley testified that he was continuing to attempt to get these affairs in order, but provided no evidence that, in fact, his tax obligations were taken care of. We, earlier this week, confirmed, both with the Department of Revenue and with the IRS, that, in fact, these tax issues remain outstanding. As a result of the evidence that the hearing officer heard, the report and recommendation before the board is that Mr. Wesley's gaming employee occupation permit renewal application be denied.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding Lamar Wesley's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Mr. Wesley's permit be revoked with the condition that he can reapply for license within 1 year if he comes in comply with taxing authority.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you. Sean Hannon, Bureau of Licensing. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. Before the board today will be 1 Category 1 license renewal, 2 fantasy contest operator licenses, 1 slot machine manufacturer license, 2 interactive gaming manufacturer licenses, 2 conditional interactive gaming manufacturer licenses, 1 conditional video game terminal operator license, and 1 conditional video game terminal establishment license. In addition, there will be 943 principals, key employees, gaming and non-gaming employees. Finally, there will be the consideration of 2 certified interactive gaming service providers and 7 registered gaming service providers. First matter for your consideration is the renewal of the Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc. Category 1 license. The license renewal hearing for this entity has been held. In addition, the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. As a result, the license renewal is ready for your consideration. I have provided you with the draft order and asked that the board consider the order to renew the Category 1 license for Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the Category 1 license renewal for Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc., as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matters for your consideration are fantasy contest operator licenses for Boom Keystone Services, Inc., a New York-based company, and Star Street LLC, doing business as Draft, also a New York-based company. Each of the companies offer fantasy gaming in Pennsylvania. The Bureau of Investigation of Enforcement has completed its investigation of both companies, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with background investigation and suitability reports. I have provided you with the draft orders and ask that the board consider the orders to approve the fantasy contest licenses, beginning first with Boom Keystone Services.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant a fantasy contest operator license to Boom Keystone Services, Inc., as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
And next would be Star Street LLC, doing business as Draft.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant a fantasy contest operator license to Star Street LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
Next is the approval of Ainsworth Game Technology Incorporated's slot machine manufacturer license. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with the draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the slot machine manufacturer's license.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant a slot machine manufacturer license to Ainsworth Game Technology, Inc., as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also interactive gaming manufacturer licenses for AGS LLC and Incredible Technologies Incorporated. AGS LLC and Incredible Technologies Incorporated are currently licensed in good standing with the board as manufacturers. Under the Gaming Act, the board may use an abbreviated process to consider the application of an already licensed manufacturer. The Bureau of Licensing, Office of Enforcement Counsel, and the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement have reviewed the applications of both AGS and Incredible Technologies and the status of the companies as licensees. And I have provided you with the results of these reviews. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that the board consider the order to approve the interactive gaming manufacturer license, beginning first with AGS LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant AGS LLC's interactive gaming manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And next would be for Incredible Technologies Incorporated.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants Incredible Technology, Inc. interactive gaming manufacturing license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matters for consideration are conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license for Palette Interactive LLC, a California-based company, and SB Tech Malta Limited, doing business as SB Tech, a Malta-based company. The companies plan to offer interactive-related gaming products to interactive certificate holders. Under the board's regulations, an interactive manufacturer applicant is eligible for conditional licensure if the applicant has submitted a completed licensing application and fees, and the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement does not object to the issuance of a conditional license. These entities satisfy the criteria. I have provided you draft orders and ask that the board consider the orders to approve the interactive gaming manufacturers, beginning first with Palette Interactive.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Palette Interactive LLC's conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of License.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And next, SB Tech Malta, doing business as SB Tech.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the issuance of the conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license to SB Tech Malta Ltd. as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for consideration is a conditional video game terminal operator license for Excel Entertainment Gaming, LLC. A VGT operator owns, services, or maintains VGTs for placement and operation at truck stop establishments. Under the Gaming Act, the board may issue a conditional VGT terminal operator license provided certain criteria are met, including the applicant has submitted a completed application, has never been convicted of a felony or gambling law violation, is current on state taxes, and has not had a similar license denied or revoked. A preliminary review of the applicant indicates they meet these conditions. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the conditional VGT operator license of Excel Entertainment Gaming, LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant Excel Entertainment Gaming LLC's video gaming terminal operator license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, there is a conditional VGT establishment license for Geneva Truck Stop, LLC. Under the Gaming Act, the board may issue a conditional license provided certain criteria are met, including that the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a completed application, and has not been convicted of a gaming law violation. A preliminary review of this applicant indicates they have met these criteria. It should be clear that this is strictly a conditional approval, and that final approval will be based on the applicant meeting all the eligibility criteria provided in the statute. A final eligibility determination shall follow investigation and site inspection by the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the conditional VGT establishment license for Geneva Truck Stop.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional video gaming terminal establishment license to Geneva Truck Stop LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for consideration are key employee and principal licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 2 key employees and 1 principal affiliate. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the key employee licenses and a conditional principal affiliate as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are temporary licenses for your consideration. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 9 principals and 14 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Additionally, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 664 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 223 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants the gaming employee occupation permit and non-gaming employee registration described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There is also the recommendation of denial for 5 gaming employee applicants and 1 non-gaming employee applicant. The applicants were notified that they were being recommended for denial and failed to request hearings within the specified time periods. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing each of the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider the motions approving those denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the applications for gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, for your consideration are withdrawal requests. In each case, the license, permit, or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with a list of 1 key and 14 gaming employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the withdrawal of key and gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify the following interactive gaming service providers: MediaTex LLC and GeoComply Solutions Incorporated. I ask that the board consider the order approving these interactive gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 7 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
This concludes the Bureau of Licensing matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Office of Enforcement Counsel, this is the Sugar House Gaming LLP matter.
Yes, the Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 15 matters today for the board's consideration, which consists of 3 consent agreements, 3 revocations, and involuntary exclusions. Item number 3 under this part of the agenda, we would ask that the board table. Mr. Donnelly and I have been in discussions about alternatives, and we're interested in discussing those alternatives between ourselves, and hopefully we'll meet a resolution to this matter that would not require the board to take any action.
Okay.
I agree. Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Did you initiate the alternatives, or did it come from Rivers? When you say you're going to explore alternatives, who initiated that conversation?
I initiated that conversation. I initiated that conversation because it's something that we normally do in situations such as these, to see if the casino is open to that. And we've done it on a number of occasions in the past.
Okay.
All right, then that's the first, that's the third matter.
The third matter. So with that, the next matter on the board's agenda today is a consideration of a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 2 licensee Sugar House HSP Gaming LP, doing business at Sugar House Casino. The consent agreement will be presented by Senior Enforcement Counsel James Armstrong. Representatives for Sugar House are present, and at this time I request that any individual who is not present as an attorney please stand, and that anyone here from Sugar House please introduce themselves for the record.
John Donnelly, D-O-N-N-E-L-L-Y, on behalf of Sugar House. With me is Kevin Brady, B-R-A-D-Y, and Mr. Brady is the Assistant GM for Sugar House.
Thank you.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. The Bureau of Casino Compliance referred a regulatory violation that occurred when Sugar House personnel permitted an intoxicated patron to play a Pai Gow Tiles table game. Commissioners, on September 3rd, 2018, a patron was arrested at Sugar House after spending more than 8 hours at Sugar House Casino gambling and consuming 17 alcoholic drinks. The patron caused a disturbance at a Pai Gow Tiles game. The patron was asked to leave the property, and after his initial refusal, complied and was assisted by a security officer. The patron and the security officer were stopped by a supervisor who directed them to go to the security office so that the patron could be issued a formal eviction prior to cashing out and leaving the casino. When the patron refused, an altercation occurred and the patron was subdued and handcuffed. The Pennsylvania State Police charged the patron with public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. The patron was issued a permanent eviction from Sugar House Casino. Commissioners, the surveillance review confirmed that during the patron's more than 8-hour visit at Sugar House, he engaged in table game play and consumed 17 alcoholic drinks, 10 of which were served as he gamed at the Pai Gow Tiles game, and 7 which he purchased at the Lucky Red Bar. The patron illustrated visible signs of intoxication while playing Pai Gow Tiles game. It was not until he could no longer uphold his head while playing the Pie-Gal Tiles game that a table games supervisor stopped him from receiving more alcoholic drinks and summoned security. Sugar House took disciplinary action against the beverage server employees involved in the incident. Coaching notes were placed in their personnel files, and they have been required to attend ramp and responsible gaming training. Commissioners, the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sugar House Casino request that the board approve the consent agreement and stipulation of settlement entered between the parties. The terms of the settlement include a provision that Sugar House shall reinforce its policies and provide additional training and guidance to its employees, including additional ramp training for its food and beverage department employees. Sugar House shall pay a civil penalty of $15,000 for the violation, and Sugar House will pay an administrative fee of $2,500 for costs incurred regarding this matter. We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Comments from Sugar House?
I have no comments.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I do. Just one question. So the patron was being, I thought I heard he was being evicted and he complied. And then something else happened that he did not comply. What was the...
A security officer was escorting him, presumably to cash out and then off the premises. And the security supervisor instructed the security officer to take him to the security office so he could be issued, the patron could be issued a formal eviction notice. And that's when the second altercation occurred.
Is that normal protocol that you're ordered?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
There are no other questions. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sugar House HSP Gaming LP as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Is there a second?
Second. Sorry about
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Holdings Acquisition Co. LP doing business as Rivers Casino. The consent agreement will be presented by Senior Enforcement Counsel Beth Manifesto. Representatives from Rivers are present. At this time, I request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record, and then that anyone not here as an attorney, please stand and be sworn.
John Donnelly, on behalf of Rivers, with me today is Lorraine Davis, the Director of Compliance. Also in the back of the room is Danielle Ciceros, Senior VP and General Counsel for Rivers.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Beth Manifesto, M-A-N-I-F-E-S-T-O, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. This proposed consent agreement between the Office of the Enforcement Counsel and Rivers Casino consists of 7 incidents wherein underage individuals accessed Rivers' gaming floor. The underage individuals ranged from 17 to 20 years of age. The 7 incidents occurred over an 11-month period, and underage gaming occurred in all 7 incidents. Of the 7 incidents, 3 engaged in slot play, 3 in table play, and 1 engaged in both slot and table play. 6 of the 7 incidents involved the sale of alcohol to the underage individuals by Rivers staff, and a total of 13 alcoholic beverages were consumed by the underage individuals. 1 underage individual successfully entered a restricted area and consumed food in Rivers' employee dining area. The total combined time for all 7 incidents in which an underage patron was unlawfully on the gaming floor or in a restricted area was approximately 15 hours and 23 minutes. In each case, with the exception of the 17-year-old, the underage patrons were permanently evicted by Rivers and criminally charged. Rivers self-reported all 7 incidents. Based upon these violations, the OEC requests the board approve the consent agreement in which Rivers will pay a civil penalty in the amount of $90,000 and an administrative fee in the amount of $2,500 to cover expenses incurred by staff in these matters, each to be paid within 5 days of the board's approval of the agreement.
Rivers have anything to add?
I just want to mention, I've said this before, each of these persons was charged. All of the charges were dropped against them. So I find, and other people in my situation find, that it's kind of a hollow threat to underage persons who come in. And several of these people had either false IDs, one person had a counterfeit ID, others were using other people's IDs. And advocate again for a process. In New Jersey, they adopted years ago after similar problems, a process where underage would lose their license for a period of time, their driver's license. And that is an effective process.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board at this time?
Just a quick comment. I think the fine's excessive and we'll vote no.
Any other comments? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Holding Acquisition Company, LP, as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Yes.
Motion,
I'm opposed.
yes. Motion's adopted.
The next three matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation of one gaming employee occupation permit and two non-gaming registrations which were issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named person. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. John Crow again, CROHE for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Alexi Allward. Ms. Allward was arrested and ultimately pled guilty to conspiracy to commit robbery, a third-degree felony. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration held by Alexi Allward.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Alexi Allward's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And the next matter for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Rubinson Alexis. Mr. Alexis stole cash from Sugar House Casino on 2 occasions, totaling $1,400 during his employment at the casino. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration held by Rubinson Alexis.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Rubinson Alexis non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Thomas Monahan, MONAGHAN with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Brandy Pessel. On September 3rd, 2018, while working as a cage cashier at the Meadows Casino, Ms. Pessel stole $100 from a patron. She was terminated from employment for her actions and criminally charged. At this time, OEC requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit issued to Brandy Pessel.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Brandy Pessel's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Jean Zhu on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On May 28, 2018, Mr. Zhu and another patron engaged in a conspiracy to cheat involving pass posting wagers while playing mini baccarat at the Meadows Casino. Mr. Zhu is permanently banned from the Meadows and criminally charged with the Pennsylvania State Police for his actions. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Jian Zhu on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jean Zhu to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Akeem Palmer on the exclusion list for cheating during the play of an easy baccarat game at Sugar House Casino and for disorderly conduct while patronizing Parks Casino. Accordingly, OEC requests the board enter judgment upon default and place Mr. Palmer on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Hakeem Palmer to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Kan Fung on the exclusion list. Mr. Fung left 2 children, ages 8 years old and 1 year old, unattended in his vehicle at Sugar House Casino parking lot for approximately 30 minutes while he engaged in gaming activities inside Sugar House Casino. Accordingly, OEC requested the board place Mr. Fung on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Con Fung to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for consideration is a petition to place Malik Clark on the exclusion list. Mr. Clark cheated while playing roulette at Harrah's Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. Specifically, Mr. Clark placed a wager after the close of the betting period, resulting in an unlawful win of $50. Additionally, in a separate incident, Mr. Clark took $50 in chips from another patron while gaming at Sugar House Casino. Mr. Clark was criminally charged. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Malik Clark on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Malik Clark to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for consideration is a petition to place Johnny Cooper on the exclusion list. Mr. Cooper cheated on 19 separate hands while playing blackjack and Spanish 21. Specifically, Mr. Cooper would place wagers after the close of the betting period, which resulted in a total unlawful win of $365. Mr. Cooper was criminally charged. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Johnny Cooper on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Johnny Cooper to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to place Ellis Quinn on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Quinn cheated on 7 occasions while playing craps at Sands Casino. The total amount that was unlawfully obtained was $3,240. Mr. Quinn was issued a permanent eviction by Sands Security and was criminally charged. He entered a guilty plea to 1 count of theft by deception. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Ellis Quinn on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Ellis Quinn to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda is a request to place Chu Siu on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Siu was observed ingesting cocaine while on the gaming floor at Sands Casino. Ms. Siu was criminally charged. She pled guilty to use or possession of drug paraphernalia. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Chu Siu on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Chu Siu to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, T-E-P-P-E-R, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to place Paul Foster on the involuntary exclusion list. While a patron at Parks, Mr. Foster assaulted a patron and stole a voucher from the slot machine the patron was playing. As a result of his conduct, Mr. Foster was criminally charged. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Paul Foster to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Paul Foster to the BGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda is a request to place Brian Lanza on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Lanza entered at least 4 motor vehicles in the parking lot of Parks Casino without permission of the vehicle's owners. Mr. Lanza stole 2 purses, multiple prescription bottles, and several other items from the vehicles. As a result of his conduct, Mr. Lanza was criminally charged, and at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Brian Lanza to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Brian Lanza to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. That concludes today's meeting. As I stated earlier, the next public meeting, which has just been added to our calendar, will be held on Wednesday, May 29th at 1 p.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion is adopted. Thank you all for your patience.